Two residential plots of land on offer in the government's land sale program for the next quarter. In France, a second night violent protests triggered by the fatal police shooting of a 17-year-old driver. And in Canada, the wreckage and presumed human remains from the imploded Titan submersible returned to port. Good evening and welcome to TVB News. The government is set to roll out two residential plots of land in Kai Tak and Tung Chung in the next quarter. Authorities say the total number of flats generated in the first half of this year has reached 65% of the housing supply target for 2023. Jackie Lin with more.
1,325 flats alongside 8,100 square meters of community facilities set to be rendered at this Kai Tak site near Sungwang Toi MTR station. Under the latest government land sale program in the July to September period, this site will require developers to build a 175-meter-long underground shopping street. The government stipulated portion accounts for 11% of the underground street's total length. Another requirement, social welfare facilities totaling 8,100 square meters in floor area. They include a neighborhood elderly center, a hostel, and a day activity center for people with mental disabilities. Also up for grabs, this site in the Tung Chung New Town extension. Expected to use some 410 flats, the 1.06-hectare land parcel marks the first residential site offered by the government at the new town. Adding up the 11 privately developed and redevelopment projects, a total of 4,050 flats will be put up for sale in the next quarter. Altogether, more than 8,200 units were generated over the first two quarters of 2023. That's 65% of this year's housing supply target set at 12,900. In the past, when bids from tenderers fell short of the target reserve price, the land sale would fail or be withdrawn. When asked if the high financing costs and high interest rates, alongside extra requirements to build community facilities, could lead to such scenarios, the government has this to say.
I'm not too worried that the inclusion of these conditions will actually affect the prospect of the site being successfully tendered. It's a matter of pricing. The inclusion of gross floor area for certain community facilities is actually a good move to make good use of the private land available to deliver some facilities of urgent needs in the community.
The Secretary for Development said land tenders that previously failed in the first round could see successful sale in the second rollout. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
Authorities are looking into ways to crack down on fake news. Chief Executive John Lee believes if the situation is under control, then legislation would not be necessary. The government first mentioned plans to crack down on fake news, which was prevalent online during the 2019 social unrest. In a newspaper interview, Lee said if there is no need for legislation, it is best not to legislate. He added a cold or a cough should not be treated as if it was cancer. Still, Lee said the priority is to complete national security legislation under Article 23 of the Basic Law. But he stressed authorities should rush the process as they are not just completing a task. He added that extensive and in-depth research is needed to ensure the law is properly enacted to avoid frequent amendments in future. The last public hearing over the controversial housing plan on part of the Fanland golf course took place today. Among those who spoke up were villagers opposing the plan, as well as businessman Alan Zeman.
Why would anyone think of building houses on a 130-year-old heritage course? People around the world will laugh at us. LCSD is going to manage it, right? And I think it would be a mistake. I mean, I work with LCSD most of my life here. They're not golf. They can't manage a golf course. Let the golf people manage the course. Open it up 7 days a week.
Supporters of the housing plan showed up outside the venue of the public hearing. Meanwhile, upset residents of the Ping Kong village, which is close to the golf course, also spoke at today's meeting. The head of the village even brought with him the contract that his father and grandfather gave him. He said the British Hong Kong government bought Ping Kong Village for $3,200. He added the agreement stipulated that the site has to be used to train children's golfing skills and cannot be resold. Chief Executive John Lee said in a newspaper interview that the decision to take back part of the golf course for housing development was made by the former administration. He said the resumption of the 32 hectares of land must go ahead in September, no matter what. Overseas, at least 150 people were arrested in France as a second night of violent protests broke out across the country. It's been triggered by the fatal police shooting of a 17-year-old driver in a Paris suburb. Protesters are angry at law enforcement tactics, but politicians say the violence is unjustifiable. 40,000 officers have been called up as reinforcements for this evening. David Garrett reports.
Fireworks at ground level aimed at police. Fears that French violence would continue are realised. Nanterre is a suburb in northwest Paris, but it resembles a war zone. Overturned cars are set on fire. The fatal police shooting of a teenager identified as Nael sparked the anger. Nael's mother called for a silent protest at the site of the shooting on Thursday. Here, on the outskirts of Paris, there is disquiet. Officers fought running battles with rioters. Several fires broke out along the same street. Shot from a high-rise apartment block, this video shows fireworks being fired in all directions. President Emmanuel Macron chaired a security meeting. He'd already described the killing as inexcusable, angering police unions who say he's not yet in possession of all the facts. On Thursday, Macron spoke about the unfolding violence. The president said police stations, schools and city halls were targeted. He called the act totally unjustifiable and thanked the emergency services. Further outside of Paris, in the commune of Mont-le-Joly, the town hall is set ablaze. More evidence of the protest growing in terms of locations and numbers. Parallels are being drawn between this police killing and that of George Floyd's murder in Minneapolis in 2020, which triggered widespread unrest across America. There were reports of disturbances in other French cities, including Roubaix, Amiens and Nice. David Garrett, TVB News.
A man tore up and burned a Quran outside Stockholm's central mosque on Wednesday after Swedish police had granted permission for the protest to take place. The event risks angering Turkey as Sweden tries to overcome Ankara's objection to the Nordic country joining NATO. Swedish authorities later charged the man with agitation against an ethnic or national group. Turkey's foreign minister has condemned the act, adding it is unacceptable to allow anti-Islam protests in the name of freedom of expression. A series of demonstrations in Sweden against Islam and for Kurdish rights have offended Turkey, whose backing Sweden needs to gain entry to NATO. Sweden sought membership of the military alliance in the wake of Russia's invasion of Ukraine last year. Turkey has held up the process, accusing Sweden of harboring people it considers terrorists and demanding their extradition. The U.S. State Department has condemned Wednesday's incident, but continued to call for Sweden's accession to NATO. Some of Russia's most senior generals have dropped out of public view after last weekend's failed Wagner Group mutiny. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin continued a bid to reassert his authority during a visit to his country's southern Dagestan region. Elsewhere, Putin's foreign policy advisor and a papal envoy held talks in Moscow about the Ukraine conflict. This as Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said the policy of justice would be at the heart of what he called a new Ukrainian doctrine. Dan O'Rell reports.
Russian Armed Forces Chief of Staff General Valery Gerasimov has not appeared in public or on state TV since the aborted Wagner Group mutiny on Saturday. Gerasimov is the commander of Russia's war in Ukraine and reportedly the holder of one of Russia's 3 nuclear briefcases. Also missing from view is General Sergei Surovikin, nicknamed General Armageddon by the Russian press for his aggressive tactics in the Syrian conflict. He bar an influential channel on the Telegram messaging application run by a former Russian Defense Ministry press officer said a purge was underway. Such a move has the potential to dramatically alter the way Russia wages its war in Ukraine. Meanwhile, Russian President Vladimir Putin flew to the Caspian city of Derbent in the mostly Muslim region of Dagestan on the Islamic holiday of Eid al-Adha. This as he bids to reassert his authority following the attempted mutiny. Putin visited an ancient citadel and a historic mosque, met with officials and walked cheering crowds next to a fountain, speaking and shaking hands with local residents. Elsewhere, during his nightly address, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said the policy of justice would be at the heart of what he called a new Ukrainian doctrine. The president had outlined plans for the doctrine earlier in the day in an address to Parliament. The speech marked the 27th anniversary of the adoption of Ukraine's constitution. Zelensky said the proposed reference points would be put forward for a nationwide discussion. And Russian President Vladimir Putin's foreign policy advisor and a papal envoy held talks in Moscow. Kremlin advisor Yuri Ushakov and Cardinal Matteo Zuppi focused on the issue of refugees, particularly children, during the Ukraine conflict. Zuppi had met with Ukraine's president and Ukrainian religious leaders in Kyiv earlier this month. Dan Roel, TVB News.
In Canada, presumed human remains and debris from the tourist submersible that imploded, killing all 5 people aboard last week, were brought ashore in Newfoundland on Wednesday. The Titan submersible was on its way to the iconic shipwreck Titanic when it imploded. The possible remains and shattered bits of the Titan were brought ashore by the Canadian-flagged vessel Horizon Arctic. U.S. medical professionals are expected to conduct a formal analysis of the human remains. The nature and extent of the possible remains recovered from the site were not specified. Still to come on tonight's news. Joe Biden starts using a CPAP machine at night to deal with sleep apnea. Locally, promotions and discounts at restaurants and retail shops marking the 26th anniversary of the city's return to Chinese rule. And around 760 exhibitors from over 30 countries and regions will take part in this year's Hong Kong Book Fair. Welcome back to TVB News. U.S. President Joe Biden in recent weeks has started using a continuous positive airway pressure machine, or CPAP, at night. The machine helps with sleep apnea, the White House said on Wednesday. More than 30 million people in the U.S. and 2.8 million people in Hong Kong are thought to have the condition. Tracy Furness reports.
As President Biden departed the White House Wednesday for Chicago, it was clear he had indents from the CPAP mask on the side of his forehead.
Mr. President, down here, sir.
Biden used the machine Tuesday night, the White House said. A CPAP machine is a motorized device that pumps air through a mask to open a sleeper's airway. Sleep apnea is potentially a serious but common condition in which breathing can stop and start for up to a minute hundreds of times in the night. It can lead to snoring and waking up with a gasp. Untreated, it can cause fatigue, sleepiness and forgetfulness. And Biden has had several forgetful moments in recent times. When asked Wednesday about the extent Russian President Vladimir Putin has been weakened by recent events regarding the revolt in Russia and war in Ukraine, Biden mistakenly said Iraq instead of Ukraine in a new verbal slip-up.
It's hard to tell, but he's clearly losing the war in Iraq. He's losing the war at home.
Biden, who is 80, is the oldest person to serve as U.S. president. In the run-up to the 2024 election, in which Biden is set to run for a second term, voters have been concerned about his age and health. The president disclosed a history of sleep apnea in 2008, but it did not come up in his most recent physical in February. Tracy Furness, TVB News.
Pop superstar Madonna has postponed the start of her upcoming tour after being hospitalized in intensive care for a serious bacterial infection. According to her manager, the Vogue singer is expected to make a full recovery. Madonna, who is 64, developed the infection last Saturday, and it led to several days in intensive care. Her health is said to be improving, but she is still under medical care. Madonna's latest world tour, the Celebration Tour, was set to kick off in Vancouver on July the 15th, but Live Nation has confirmed its postponement with promises to reschedule any cancelled dates. Back locally, special traffic arrangements will be in place on July 1st, the 26th anniversary of the city's return to Chinese rule. To mark the occasion, thousands of eateries and retail shops will roll out a series of one-off promotions and discounts. Veronica Lin tells us more.
Some road closures were already in place this morning. That's because the police band was rehearsing through Expo Drive, Central, and the Central Wan Chai bypass tunnel. It lasted until 11 a.m. today. Bus routes were adjusted and bus stops were moved to cope with the rehearsal. That, as this Saturday marks Hong Kong's Handover anniversary. Apart from a series of discounted fares on buses, ferries, and water taxis, the food and beverage industry also has something special in store to celebrate the event. The participating eateries include fast food chains, tea restaurants, hot pot spots, and more. Almost all will offer a 29% discount on selected items. The number 29 is a play on 71, or July 1st. They will also have a specific sign outside their restaurant to let diners know they are participating in the event. Jonathan Zeman, Chief Executive Officer of Lan Kwai Fong Group, said their restaurants are offering discounted brunches, free-flow packages, special Wagyu beef courses, as well as champagne.
We see the market getting better and better. This past long weekend with the Dragon Boat Festival, saw a lot more people in town, and we can see a lot more business travel coming to Hong Kong and to Lan Kwai Fong.
Still, while the scheme is set to bring in heaps of customers, some questions why only selected items are discounted and only for that particular day. Catering sector lawmaker Tommy Chung said a manpower crunch is to blame, which is at its worst in years.
I think staff shortage, whether we do the discount, we are looking at huge staff shortage. There's one reason that we cannot do 30% across the board, because then we will be having a long queue outside and not being able to serve our customers properly.
Whilst the F&B industry is still struggling with high rent, the sector said that the lifting of the ban on imported workers, such as waiters and junior cooks, is a good first step. Veronica Lin, TVB News.
The week-long Hong Kong Book Fair will get underway at the Convention and Exhibition Centre in Wan Chai on July 19th. The fair's organiser, the Hong Kong Trade Development Council, believes the event will attract more visitors than last time, following the relaxation of pandemic restrictions in the city. Mimosa Ngai took a sneak peek at what to expect at the fair.
The annual book fair will return next month, and tickets are available for sale starting tomorrow. With this year's theme being children's and young adult literature, the HKDDC hopes people can explore the educational value of such reading material and promote the work of local writers. Moreover, the book fair alongside two other exhibitions will feature around 760 exhibitors from over 30 countries and regions this year. When asked about whether censorship will be imposed on any publications, the Deputy Executive Director of the HKDDC said such an action is not necessary.
We do not apply any censorship on any of the publications in the book fair, as long as they belong to the category 1. Because I think a lot of our exhibitors are already very familiar with the house rules of the Hong Kong Book Fair, because they need to abide by the Hong Kong law.
Meanwhile, John also anticipates over 850,000 visitors will be in attendance, as it is the first book fair to take place since pandemic restrictions in the city were relaxed.
I think apart from the local citizens, which we think would be very passionate about coming into the Hong Kong Convention Exhibition Centre again to see the book fair, but this year I think more people will be anticipated to come from across the border. First thing, because we have the exhibition station, which facilitated a lot of new territories, as well as Greater Bay Area, Shenzhen especially, citizens to come. You just come straight to the exhibition station.
Visitors at the book fair can enjoy the Sport and Leisure Expo and the World of Snacks exhibition, where individuals can taste international treats at the scene. Mimosa Nai, TVB News.
That's the news. Thanks for watching.